Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jim Reedy. I'm with Sheehan Finney, and this is the New Hampshire Tech Alliance HR Exchange. I'm thrilled to have you with us this frosty January morning. Hope all is well and you're staying warm. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, this is our January meeting. We meet once a month. Our next meeting will be in February 9th, and we've got the important topic of avoiding and responding to harassment and discrimination with remote workers. The EEOC had statistics out recently, said that harassment claims have risen significantly with remote workers, whether it's that the informality of remote work or not having someone look over your shoulder in the workplace and so on. In March, we're actually changing our program because of changes with the law and with developments in the law. So stay tuned for that. I believe it's going to be internal investigations, but it may also be simple drafting of contracts for HR professionals. In April, we're talking about the important topic of the employer's guide to the New Hampshire unemployment process, because especially during COVID, there have been a lot of changes with regard to the augmenting of benefits and so on. And then perhaps the potential for repayment of overpaid benefits. In May, we'll be doing our annual employment law seminar. I think it's our 33rd annual, and we'll be providing more information on that. And then June, for the High Tech Alliance, we'll do our annual year in review. So that's sort of a quick sense of what we're going to be doing. A few other housekeeping items. This program, like our other programs, is eligible for SHRM credits. At the very end of Katie's program, you'll see a slide up there with a code number on it for purposes of getting your credits. We will also provide PDFs to all attendees of Katie's program, so that you'll have that as well. Chat and Q&A available in this program, so you can ask Katie and Caitlin your questions throughout the program, and ones that are directed to Sheehan Finney for purposes of credits and the like and other housekeeping matters we'll take care of, but Katie and Caitlin will respond to those questions throughout. So we're just so thrilled to have Katie Geary and Caitlin McSherry with us today. They are financial planners, and you think, well, what's the tie into HR? Well, it's actually it makes a great deal of sense. First of all, it's wellness. And so in the last couple of years, of course, we spent a lot of time talking about wellness with COVID. We've talked about it before that, but it was especially acute during COVID, and it continues to be. It's also, though, however, in addition to physical and mental wellness, we want to talk about financial wellness, because one of the greatest stressors in a marriage and in a relationship, you think about COVID having issues of amplified issues with depression and anxiety. Well, what's one of the greatest stresses you have is a financial stress. So we thought this would be ideal as you start a new year with your New Year's resolutions, like me buying a Peloton bike, you want to focus on getting your financial house in order. And with other uncertainties in the workplace, rather in the economy and the market, it makes perfect sense to do that. But in the workplace, it makes perfect sense for purposes of a retention benefit. If your employees feel financially secure, and especially the benefits you might offer or that things that you might supplement, could be another reason why you've either been successful in recruiting and certainly retaining employees. So I'm thrilled to have Caitlin and Katie here today. I've got Katie's bio, and it's impressive for a young person, and that sounds like an old person thing to say. But Katie is a New Hampshire resident. She was born and raised here, which is actually in and of itself a relatively unique thing, because a lot of people in New Hampshire are not originally from here, myself included. She was just sharing before we went on that her husband is training for the Boston Marathon, and he was out running yesterday. And it reminds me of what they say about mad dogs and Englishmen out in the noonday sun. He was actually stopped by a photographer for the union leader as to why he was out running in 1-degree temperatures. But that's the commitment someone has to run the Boston Marathon. But she actually, in addition to having a bachelor's degree in American Sign Language from the Rochester Institute of Technology, she also has an MBA. And more directly, She serves as a member of the Tech Women's Power Breakfast Committee, and she's a member of Leadership Manchester, class of 2022. She recently earned her CFP, which is Certified Financial Planner certification, putting herself in. I think this is pretty impressive, Katie. 5.4% of individuals who accomplish this before age 30. Apparently, not only her husband is the most driven person in her household, and 23% of female advisors reach this designation entirely. So that's an amazing accomplishment. So both Katie and Caitlin here today to talk about getting your financial health in order and financial wellness. So please welcome both and enjoy the program. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. So like Jim mentioned today, we're going to go over some of your New Year's resolutions, right? Goal setting financially is just one of those things that really nicely integrates to something to look at in January. Today, my goal for you all is to take one thing away from this. I have Caitlin McSherry on the line, as Jim mentioned. She's going to be monitoring the Q&A, so we want this to be as interactive as possible. So she's going to be monitoring the chat, interrupting me with questions as those come through. So please feel free to comment and interact as much as you feel comfortable. The other big thing I wanted to mention is for you folks specifically in HR, the past almost 2 years since COVID hit has been, I'm sure, a whirlwind of constant changes, moving left and right with whatever comes your way, being dynamic, and that has to be somewhat exhausting. So if today you get nothing else but something for your own personal financial situation, I'm happy with that. But the goal is really to see, okay, what else can we do for our employees? How can we make sure they implement some of these financial strategies to have them have a better work life and a better home life? So here's my bio that Jim already read. So thank you, Jim, for the introduction. Just a little bit about us and our firm. I'm a financial advisor with Rise Private Wealth Management. Our headquarters is in Bedford, New Hampshire. Our mission here is to provide financial advice that brings you confidence, simplicity, and success. And throughout the reason I mention this is throughout the presentation, what I want you to see is that theme. We're going to be presenting topics in hopefully a simplistic way so that you can take some sort of action from those and hopefully have some success in your financial goals. So this theme should be woven through the presentation and you should be able to see that. Our vision is to be the most referred and recognized wealth management practice in the industry with a strong community presence. Like I mentioned, we're headquartered in Bedford, New Hampshire, but our goal is we have locations all over the country, and COVID has really enabled us to meet virtually with so many different folks. So for us, it's really important to be involved in our local community, and that's what we have done. And the reason we do some of these presentations is to educate New Hampshire folks, but this being virtual, I'm sure there's some folks outside of New Hampshire as well. So we're just really happy to be here and to be educating the community and hope, again, that you can take something away from this. So let's dive in. Stressors for your employees. I was just reading a book last night and Jim hit the nail on the head here. Money is one of the top stressors in a marriage and in relationships, right? So all that stress at home can be led right into your workplace every single day. We want to have happy employees who feel confident in their financial situation and that stress be reduced for them. So where do we start? Where we like to start with folks and have folks start themselves in their own personal journey is goal setting. When it comes to financial planning, it's always important that you start with a goal so you know what you're working for. On the slide here, you're going to see some examples of goals that your employees may have for themselves, right? Save more than I spend, pay off all my debt, be prepared for my next significant life event. Maybe that's marriage, maybe it's a first-time home, a second home, maybe it's a child, or ultimately just build wealth and be confident that I have enough. So today we're going to try to address each of these goals and see how your employees may be able to take some actionable steps towards that. And our first step with our clients is creating smart goals so that they can truly know when they've achieved that goal, and all the work that they've put towards that. So first step is going to be goal setting with your employees. Okay. So next, we're going to talk about what your expenses are, right? We like to categorize these in essential versus lifestyle. And Kate, I'll have you monitor the chat here, but can anyone tell me what they think an essential expense might be?
We have rent, food, mortgage, utilities, food, mortgage, healthcare, heat.
Absolutely.
Great answers.
Yes, great. So exactly, hit the nail on the head. Shelter, food, and by food, I don't mean DoorDash or delivery. I mean just the very basics at the grocery store. I don't think I heard healthcare, right? Medical expenses. All those things are essential expenses that we don't necessarily have a lot of control over, but we need to have to make sure our basic needs are met. Okay, now let's talk about lifestyle. Any examples of what you might think a lifestyle expense is?
Travel, streaming services. That's important. DoorDash, car, gym membership, clothing.
Absolutely. Yep. These is what I like to call all the things we really couldn't do when COVID first hit, right? We couldn't travel. We couldn't go out and do our hobbies that we really like to do. I guess we could still use our streaming services, and that's probably what most of us did. But this is all the extra stuff that makes life enjoyable, that we look forward to doing after work, right? So this has a place in our expenses. And a lot of people, when we first talk to people, they're like, oh, you're going to tell me not to buy my extra cup of coffee a week. And my job isn't to tell you exactly where to spend your money, right? It's just empowering people to know where they're putting their money and having an understanding of that so they can truly dive in to see what's important to them, right? Is if your goal is to pay off all your debt by a certain age, then maybe some of this lifestyle stuff should be cut back. And that's up to your employee or yourself to decide where you want to cut back or where you don't, and that's okay. So when we look at what percentage of each of these you should be experiencing in your financial plan, we like to follow what's called the 50-20-30 income rule. So 50% to fixed costs. So this is going to be mostly your essential expenses, right? That's going to be your mortgage payment. That's going to be your utilities, your medical insurance, any loan or debt payments that you have. I think someone put car and lifestyle, and to a certain extent, I do agree, right? If you're driving a really nice, fancy car, right, there's a lifestyle aspect to that, but transportation is an essential expense, right? So transportation, I might fall under this fixed cost as well. Then 20% to your financial goals. And we'll talk more in this presentation about where the 20% should go, right? Should that be in your 401k? Should that be in your savings account? Where's the best place to start, right? So 20% to your financial goals and then 30% flexible. And the reason I like the 30% flexible number is that as you all have experienced, this is not, life is not as we expect, right? There's going to be ebbs and flows. There's going to be heavier months of expenses, right? Christmas, typically December's busier for folks financially, right? So we want to be able to have the 30% built in there so that we can roll with what happens there. If all of your money is tied up in fixed expenses, you have not a lot of flexibility to move around and reallocate as necessary. Okay, so once we've gone through our expenses and looked at, okay, where's my money going and how much do I truly have to allocate? We have to start saving, right? So our first step when we think about saving and thinking about that 20% towards financial goals, your first thing that you want to have is a good cash reserve for emergencies. Now, we often get, okay, what's the cash reserve look like? You hear 3 to 6 months of expenses all the time. And the question I often get is, okay, well, should I have 3 or should I have 6? And there's a lot of different factors to consider in that. So for most of you, probably most of your employees are W-2 employees, right? So we take into consideration if you're a W-2, a 1099, if you're self-employed, if your income is variable or not. If you're one of the more variable incomes, or maybe not guaranteed, you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, we have people lean more towards that 6 months, right? Because that way you have more protection in case something were to happen. The other factor we like to consider is how many incomes are in your household? Is it a 2-income household? Is it a 1-income household? If there's multiple incomes coming into play, then you have a little bit more built-in protection, because if one income goes away somehow, the other one is still there feeding into that. So then you might go closer to that 3-month expense, or months of expense for your cash reserve. But all factors to consider when you're thinking about how much do I truly need in the bank before I start putting up money other places, okay? Next, then we're going to go into saving, right? Saving 20% of your income each month. Again, the question is, okay, where am I saving 20% of my income each month? Is it all building up at the cash at the bank because I don't know where else to put it, right? So that we're going to go into that today, and some options that make sense for your employees to look at for investing and getting your money working for you. And lastly, set goals to work. I started this conversation talking about goals, and I'm going to continue talking about it throughout this presentation. But if you or your employees have goals that they are working towards and they have a game plan to get there, I've personally seen people become much more motivated to focus on their plan. And when they get there, they feel more achieved, they feel happy, they feel accomplished, right? But if you don't have a goal and you're just winding along this financial road, you don't really know when you feel like you've succeeded, correct? So setting goals is important, and having a game plan to get there is also important. And I'll pause quick. Kate, any questions in the chat?
Not right now.
Okay, great. Okay, now that we've put some basics and items into play, you can kind of determine where to put your money now, when to start getting invested, right? So we're going to talk about the benefits of saving early and saving often. Okay, so let's talk about saving early and the high cost of waiting. So this graphic, I'm going to show you different starting points of investing at age 35, at age 45, and age 55. And then when you get to a typical retirement age of age 65, how much money that you've had. This graph is based on a 6% return, which isn't an unreasonable return over time. So when we look at age 35, you have someone contributing $5,000 every year and getting invested for 30 years. And what's important about this is that they're getting invested and they're staying invested, okay? They're not pulling out of the market every time it drops. You're keeping your money in there. You're keeping it working for you, okay? So for those of you who can do quick math, over the 30 years, this 35-year-old has saved $150,000. But their ending value with investment return and compounding interest is $419,000, okay? So now let's look if we start at 45. So 45-year-old saving that same amount, that $5,000 a year for 20 years. Again, quick math is $100,000 over that 20 years that they've saved. Now the ending balance is $195,000 or so, right? So a respectable amount, but you can see the slope of this graph and how starting earlier in the compounding interest has increased this 35-year-old's amount much faster than this 45-year-old's amount, right? Now, lastly, let's say you start at 55, you get a later start in life, and you're saving $6,000 a year for 10 years. So that's $60,000 over time. Again, only around $84,000 left there at the end of that. And the slope is lower, right? It's not as aggressive there. So my point with this is that for especially your younger employees, encouraging them to get enrolled, and actually in your 401k plan, if you offer that, you can, depending on your provider, you can allow them to be auto-enrolled at a certain point if they do not elect any sort of contribution. So some of this stuff is encouraged and can be built into your plan for your employees to start saving and saving into their 401ks or their retirement plans to get this working for them as soon as possible, and be on somewhat of an automated system for yourselves as well. Okay, the second part of investing, and what I talked about previously, is the importance of getting invested, but also staying invested. It's so many people are sometimes gun shy on when to start getting invested. When's the right time? Should we wait till the market drops? Is this a bubble, right? There's all these different questions when you're thinking about when you should get invested and when you should keep your money in the market, right? So what I'm going to talk about here is what we call dollar cost averaging, which very simply is getting in the market at different points. So if you think about if folks are enrolled in your retirement plan, saving into their 401ks, and they're doing that on maybe a biweekly or a monthly basis, this is an example of how that can play out for them over time. So if you look at the first month, and this example is $300 a month for your employee, okay? At the first point, they have $300, right? So that's $10 at $30 per share, they're gonna get 10 shares of that, okay? But in February, the market dips, right? So the cost of the share at that time is only $10, so they're actually getting 30 shares at that time. And then as you can see, as that goes forward, March, the market goes up a bit, and then goes down and up, right? So this is like the market, right? It's a little volatile. Of course, things go up and down. But the point of this illustration is that if at the very beginning you waited and you said, you know what, this is going to be the lowest the market's going to go, and they put all their money in this first portion, right? Their average cost per share would be $30, right? But because that went over time and you contributed over time, your average cost per share is actually $17.25. So 24 cents. So this is just another way for people to get invested. And what we encourage people to do is it's something on a systematic basis, so that you're not really responding to market fluctuation, and allow your money to ride through that. So, what we like to tell people is it's not timing the market, it's truly time in the market. And I hope these two slides kind of showed you the illustration of that and why that can be important. Okay. Caitlin, any questions?
Not yet.
Great. Okay. So, here are the updated numbers for key retirement plan limits and figures. You'll see here, and depending on your company's demographic, your pay scale, number of employees, each of these different options may or may not be available to you to offer to your employees. But what I wanted to point out is there's a few things that changed for 2022. And I'm sure most of you know this, but 401k, 403b, 457 deferrals, that increased by $1,000 this year. The simple IRA deferrals also increased. The defined contribution limit also increased. So these are always good to refresh and make sure you, and as well as your employees, know that these numbers increased, so they can update their percent contributions to their retirement plans if they were already maxing those out. So all important figures to be aware of and to share with folks. Okay, so, we talked about diversification of time, right? Investing over time, investing at different points in the market. But what we'd like to talk to folks about also is tax diversification. And on the previous slide, we looked at some different options, right? You have your 401ks, which sometimes might have a Roth option or a pre-tax option or an after-tax option, right? So truly educating your employees on what that means for them now and long-term can be crucial. So sorry about that. So what you can see here is that these are 3 different buckets that you can save into. And what I want people to think about when I'm talking through this is that we're not talking about investment diversification. So let's just pick a, Apple as a stock, right? You could theoretically own Apple in any of these buckets. So I don't want you to think about that. I want you to think about this from a tax perspective. So when you're looking at this, if you look at the tax deferred option, this is probably the one that most of your employees utilize, right? It's going to be before taxes into this bucket. And then as that money grows, it's grown tax deferred, and then it comes out tax free. Tax at your ordinary income rate. So let's see, does anyone know what might fall in this bucket? What types of plans fall in this bucket? Anything, Kate?
Roth.
No, so not Roth. Roth does fall around here in a different bucket. I'll give you a head start. It's actually this one up here. Any other guesses?
401k.
Yep. So the traditional contribution into your 401k, correct? That falls into this. If any other guesses, Kate, before I keep going?
Nope, that's it so far. Oh, another one, 403b. Sorry.
Yep, 403b. Yes, the pre-tax option. Exactly. So your pre-tax options of your 403bs, your 401ks, if employees have traditional IRAs, right, those are all going to fall in here. If pension plans are offered, that falls in here as well. Or if you guys offer deferred compensation plans, that falls in here as well, right? So what honestly, this was one of the only options in retirement plans for a long time. Someone mentioned Roth, and Roth is new to the game for a lot of folks. If you have older employees, when they started, Roth wasn't even an option. So a lot of people think, okay, well, I'm earning money now, right? So when I get to retirement, my ordinary income rate, whatever that may be, is going to be lower because I'm not earning any money. But what we like to chat with folks about is, what you might not be considering at that time is your Social Security payments are coming in. If you do have a pension payments are coming in, which you have no control over on how much you're getting. And that's also taxed to your ordinary income rate. The other factor is we don't know what's going to happen to government tax rates in the future, right? Right now, we're in a pretty historically low tax rate, which is those laws are set to sunset in 2025 unless government implements new laws, which they were talking about doing some tax law changes at the end of last year with the Build Back Better bill. But we really don't know what tax rates are going to look like in the future. And that's speculative, right? It's kind of up to your interpretation on where that's going to go. But what I would say is that if you have all of your money, most of your money when you get to retirement in this bucket here, that tax deferred bucket on the bottom right, then you don't have control to choose on where you want to take your money from. Okay. So if we look at this bottom left bucket, the taxable bucket, this money is after tax in, right? And then it's taxed while it's in there, and then it's taxed on the way out. So think about your checking and savings account, right? Banks aren't getting much interest these days. You're probably getting like 0.01% maybe. There's some earnings on there that are taxable. If you probably heard of like Robinhood this year, or some of those investing apps that folks are getting involved in. So let's say someone bought GameStop as the stock. Let's say they bought it today, January 12th, 2022. Okay. Now let's say it went up and they wanted to sell it, and they sold it next month. Great. So you lock in those gains. But because you didn't hold it for a year, that person is going to be taxed at their short-term capital gains rate, which is equal to their ordinary income rate. If they had held that stock for over a year, they're going to be taxed at their long-term capital gains rate, which depending on where you fall in your tax bracket, for most it's 15%, but it could be as low as your ordinary income rate if it's less than 15%, or it could be as high as 25%. That capital gains treatment, short-term and long-term capital gains treatment, was up for discussion in the recent tax bill. There was possibility of that percentage increasing for folks. So again, having different places for your money to grow, right? If the tax laws change and you lose, we obviously have no control over what the government's going to decide to do with some of these specific legislative actions. So we want to make sure that you have control, right? So moving on to that last bucket, the tax-free bucket. So this one's our favorite, right? You've paid your taxes and then the money goes in tax-free, or money goes in after tax, I'm sorry, and then it grows tax-free and comes out tax-free, okay? So
Sorry, can I just interrupt you for 1 second?
absolutely.
We have a question. Says, can I do a Roth IRA if my company doesn't offer a Roth 401k?
Great question. Okay, so oftentimes, this is one of the most common questions that I get is, well, I maxed out my Roth 401k, or I don't qualify for a Roth IRA because my income limits are too high, right? So there's a bunch of limitations on income limits for an IRA specifically, but the contribution limits. So if we look back here for the Roth IRA and the 401k, these limits are not connected, right? So you could put $20,500 into your 401k this year and also put $6,000 into your IRA this year. So these are mutually exclusive. They're not connected in any way. The one thing I will say is that there is certain income limitations to be able to contribute to a Roth IRA. But for your 401k, you can contribute to the Roth option and those income limits do not apply. Okay. Any other questions, Caitlin? No? Okay. Okay. So when we look at this tax-free bucket, okay, again, similar comments to was in that tax deferred bucket. Well, I'm making a lot of money right now and I don't want to pay my taxes on that right now, which may be perfectly appropriate for your situation, right? But what we want is to have some sort of money in that tax-free bucket when we get to retirement. So in this situation that maybe you have deferred compensation, or maybe you have a pension that's going to have a large payout in a certain year, you have more flexibility to take from that Roth bucket rather than the tax deferred bucket that you've put money in as well. So I hope I've illustrated that there's different levers having tax diversification allows you to have different levers to pull when you get to retirement. And that puts the control in your hands, right? We can only control what we can control. And this is something that you have in your power to control. The one thing I also will mention that also falls in this tax-free bucket, for any of you or for any of your employees who have kids, so there's college planning involved, 529 plans fall in this bucket. Also what's called specially designed life insurance, cash value life insurance falls in this bucket. So there's other ways to get into this bucket besides just traditional Roth 401k contributions or Roth IRA contributions, and those things fall in this bucket as well. Now, what I really do want to point out is that when we look at this time value of money slide that we had here, sorry, I'm going back a few slides. As I mentioned, this 35-year-old, let's look at their case. They've contributed $150,000 over time, but they end up with $419,000 after their investments performed and when they get to retirement, okay? So my question to you all that I'd ask you to ponder is, do you want to pay taxes on $150,000 that you've contributed over time, or do you want to pay taxes on $420,000 when that money is distributed to you, right? So when you think about it that way, in my opinion, it is obviously a personal decision for you and your family, but there's true dollar amounts that when you assign them, it almost doesn't make sense, you know, not to have some money in that Roth bucket. Okay. Questions on tax diversification, tax control, any of these limits that I've gone over? No? Great. Awesome. Okay, so what are options within your retirement plans that you can offer to your employees? These, again, all dependent on your provider, right? And your company's demographics. But most of you probably know there's a match that can be offered depending on the plan that you're providing. And honestly, what we advise most of the folks we work with and your employees is that we want people to at least be contributing enough to get the match. And, you know, we see a lot of verbiage saying, you know, either it's going to be a match 3% for 3%, right? Or it might be 50% up to 6%. So just making sure that that verbiage is clear for your employees, and that they understand what that means and how much they need to put in to be sure to get the match, because that money's already allocated for them, and it's free money that they're leaving on the table if they don't take advantage of that. Okay. So next, there's different options within your 401k that you can offer: a pre-tax option, a Roth option. There's also an after-tax bucket that can be offered as well. And when we looked at the contribution limits, you might have seen a defined contribution benefit limit. And what that after-tax option is above and beyond what people contribute to their 401k, the $20,500. Plus whatever match the company is putting in there. So let's say that's an extra $5,000. So $25,500. The difference between the $61,000 and the $25,500 is what folks can actually save into that after-tax bucket. Now, there's a little bit of complexity in there with how that's taxed for your employees and what the strategy is there. But I just like to tell folks that is an offering that can be added to your 401k plan, depending on your provider, summary plan description, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just another way to allow your employees to save more for their future. Okay. In-service distributions. So some of your plans may offer at a certain age for your employees to take their money out of their 401k plan, 403b plan, and move it into a IRA that has the same tax treatment. And the only reason that this is a great benefit to offer for your employees is that within that IRA bucket, there's a lot more investment options and there's a lot more control your employees can have over that, right? If someone wants an annuity, it's really hard, depending on your provider, to provide that for your employees, but in an IRA, they have more options to do things like that. So having that in-service distribution available to them is a great opportunity for them. And lastly, there's sometimes self-directed brokerage accounts, which again, allows your employees further options when it comes to investing, just besides some of like maybe the 20 or 30 options that are already in the plan. So here are some really great options to make sure, one, you're providing for your employees, but two, your employees know about these options, right? It's if you guys do so much work in making sure you're doing the best for your employees, and if they don't know about it or they don't know how to utilize it and what it means for them, I'm guessing there's less of a participation rate in that. Okay.
And we do have a question. So can a public employer match a 457?
Can a public employer match a 457? It depends on the type of 457 plan. There's a few different types of 457 plans. And it does depend on your company size and income and et cetera, et cetera. So that's a pretty personal question, but feel free to shoot me an email. My email's at the bottom here and I can work through that with you. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, great. Okay, helping your employees protect themselves. So what we like to refer this to as is Plan B, right? Everything we've talked about so far is Plan A. Your employees are setting goals, they're saving, they're putting money towards their retirement plans. They get to retirement, it's super exciting. They've had a long, healthy career with you. That's plan A. Plan B is, what if something goes wrong, right? What if someone gets hurt? What if someone in their family passes away unexpectedly, or they do? So making sure your employees understand some of these benefits that you're offering, and taking full advantage of them when appropriate is super crucial to make sure that they have a fully protected financial plan. So let's talk about life insurance, right? There's a few different types of life insurance that are available. So most typically through employers, it's going to be your group insurance option. There's also term insurance options and permanent insurance options. Typically, permanent insurance isn't offered through workplaces anymore. Typically, most of your group insurance is going to be some type of term type policy, right? What that means is that as long as they're employed with you and they're enrolled in that coverage, they have that coverage. But if they leave, they no longer have that group coverage. But having some sort of protection is important for folks, especially with families, to make sure that their loved ones are taken care of after they're gone. And you know that the amount of coverage that's needed is a very individualized and personalized discussion to figure out, you know, how much debt do you have? What's that? What's it gonna cost to pay off that debt at your death? What amount are you contributing to your family goals? And if something were to happen to you, will your family still be able to reach those goals at that time, right? So all things to consider. So what's important with the life insurance coverage, more specifically for folks who are healthy, is that having them compare rates, not only to your own coverage, but some outside coverage as well. Sometimes some of the younger folks can get a little bit of a better coverage just because your group coverage is covering your whole office. Whereas some of the term or individual coverage looks at the individual person, and if they're healthier than most, then they can get sometimes a cheaper rate. So I always recommend folks obviously enroll in the included coverage and then just compare rates once they get there, okay? Group disability insurance. So disability insurance is, in my opinion, one of the most important insurances that you can have. For most people, their largest asset at this time isn't going to be their house. It isn't going to be their car. It might not even be their retirement saving. It's their ability to earn over time, right? That is a huge asset. And if folks cannot do that anymore, their goals are derailed. So there's a few different options that you can offer, short-term and long-term disability insurance. The big thing that I like to point out with the disability insurance is that if you as the employer pay for those premiums, which is a wonderful benefit, educating the employees that at that point when they become disabled, they will be responsible for paying taxes on that at their ordinary income rate. Now, if you offer this coverage through work, but the employee pays for it, that coverage in and of itself, when it pays out to them, is not taxable to them because they've paid for the benefit. So a distinction that I like to point out to folks, because when you say, you know, maybe your benefit's up to $6,000 a month, mentally people say, okay, well, $6,000 a month, I can probably live off that. We're not going to be able to do everything, but we'll be okay. But once you kind of go into the math of what their ordinary income rate is and what their true take home might be, that number gets smaller and smaller. So again, disability insurance is crucial for so many folks because their ability to earn is their biggest asset that we want to be able to protect. And just having them understand some of the intricacies of those options can just empower them to make sure they're doing the right things for themselves and their family. Lastly, long-term care. Some employers used to offer this, but the one thing I like to point out about long-term care is that, and this is a stat that I have, it's an estimated 52% of people age 65 or older will need some sort of long-term care services during their lifetime. And the number from 2019 is the average cost of this is $95,000 annually. So long-term care can be a huge strain on someone's financial situation once they're older, and can really impact some of their legacy goals and how they want to take care of their family in the future once they're gone. So having this isn't something that's typically offered through a lot of workplaces, but just having some knowledge around this and when the appropriate time to look at this is really important for your employees' long-term success and future in their financial plan. Any questions, Caitlin?
Not right now. Oh, just kidding. Is it more important to offer short-term or long-term disability? Do most companies do both?
Great question. Great question. So, if I had to choose one, if you're making me choose one, I think I would go with long-term disability, because if folks can self-protect in short term with a higher cash reserve and a higher cash flow, and they're going to come out of that, that means that they can get back into work, right? They can get back and start earning that income. But long-term disability, you have to have a pretty significant event to not be able to work anymore. So that long-term disability is crucial for a longevity purposes. And to answer your question, it really is dependent on the company and the size of the company, but many companies that we work with that of clients of ours, many offer at least some option for short-term and long-term disability. And some of that cost is just passed on to the employee, and the employee has the option of purchasing it. So, but just having some sort of option there is better than not having anything at all. Anything else, Caitlin?
Nope.
Okay, great. Okay, so next we're going to talk about estate planning, right? The other portion of this, not only the insurance protections and making sure you're protected in that way, but it's also making sure your money and your personal health is protected in the event that you become either incapacitated or pass away, right? So some of the benefits that I've seen folks offer is legal plans, right? So it's a discounted rate for their employees to access legal advice, but also some of the things that are included with that are some basic estate planning documents like wills, power of attorneys, and healthcare directives. We encourage folks to have at least these three documents, the wills, the power of attorney, and healthcare directives at the very minimum. For some folks, trust work makes sense. And some of these legal plans offer a discount for that. But anyways, my point with this is that having each of those done and taken care of is super crucial to longevity and health. And again, if you were to become incapacitated. The one thing I'll mention about the power of attorney, these can be financial or medical. And we like to encourage folks once their kids go off to college and they're technically no longer minors, to just look into possibly getting a medical power of attorney with your children who have gone away to college, so that if they need help and there's an event that you can't get to right away, but you want to talk to a doctor, there's a medical power of attorney on file so that you can work through that with them. But again, very basics on what we recommend people to have to protect themselves financially. And then obviously, as that's a very personal situation, some additional estate planning can be had. The other big thing that you folks have a direct impact on is beneficiary designation. So I don't know how many times I've had people bring me statements, and in big bold letters at the end of the statement, it says no beneficiary on file, right? We want to make sure folks at least put someone in there. And what I've seen companies do, which I think is excellent, is that in their open enrollment period, they have people go in and confirm their beneficiaries, right? For most folks, if they're married, they're married for a long time. It doesn't really change, but as any life event changes, right? You get married, you have kids, you want to make sure those beneficiary designations are updated and up to date. especially if you go through a divorce or something like that, and that's following the directives of whatever your divorce agreement was. But making sure folks are consistently looking at their beneficiary designations, and making sure those are up to date for themselves and their family, because that is I'm not going to say irrevocable once you pass away, but it's pretty hard to reverse that. That's what they're going to look at first. So we want to make sure that's up to date for all of our employees. All righty. Caitlin, any questions?
Not right now.
Good. Okay. So, what does all this mean for yourself and your employees, and how do we implement and make good habits for the future? Because as we talk about goal setting, as we talk about the start of the year, it's not a quick fix. It's just about implementing some good habits that are going to be long-term, for long-term success for you and your employees. So very basically, have a plan for what you want in the future, right? Start dreaming. What's those goals that you want to accomplish? And then secondly, it's never too early to start saving, even if it's $5, $10 a month, right? That's better than nothing. And I hope the graphs showing you the high cost of waiting gave you some motivation to maybe just put a little bit more aside every month to get that growing and moving for you. Next, we just want to always make sure we know where your money is going, right? Because I'm not here to tell you not to spend money on this and to spend money on that. What I'm here to tell you is that knowing where your money is going empowers you to make some of these decisions and how you can reach your goals and how your employees can reach their goals, right? So that is all part of the goal planning, goal setting for your financial future, and a great way to start 2022. So what does this all mean for you, right? How do we make sure that your employees are taking full advantage of all the benefits that you work so hard to offer? And what we find most successful is a financial wellness program. So a clear initiative from your company to tell people, okay, this is important for us, for you, because we know it's a stressor for you. And we know that is crucial to your happiness at home. And I'm just going to throw out some stats here of what studies have shown, right? 95% of employers who offer these programs agree that their financial wellness program has been effective in reaching its company's goals. 84% of employees say financial planning, wellness, and education workshops are a must-have or a nice-to-have. And 53% of employees would be more loyal to their current employer when financial planning programs are offered. And I was reading an article the other day, and it said nearly 3 in 4, so 74% of HR professionals that were interviewed had not added a new benefit, expanding their existing benefits for their employees. And, in the times that we're in, I'm sure you're seeing lots of people leaving, and you're constantly looking for people to hiring. Having some sort of clear financial planning benefit and wellness program could be a real attraction for folks to get them into your company, and to really show that you care for your employees. And just help them manage their financial stress, because the pandemic, again, obviously affected all of us, and affected people's finances one way or another.
And we do have a question.
Great.
How do these programs help my employees with financial stress?
Absolutely, right? So these programs, my thought is that, having people come in and be educated, right? So like this today, if you can take away one thing, right, you can feel like you're making progress towards your goals, that you can make progress towards their own financial plan, and know that they are making good decisions for their financial future and family. Any other questions?
Nope.
So what we found most successful is having a financial wellness program comprised of 3 base components for your employees. First being financial education is what I just talked about, right? It's workshops like this. It's deeper dives into different topics that are important to your employees, like maybe first-time home buying, saving for college for your kids, reducing debt, investments, right? All that we can deeper dive into each of those topics. for financial education for your employees and provide that to them so they can take away what they need to take away from that. Okay. Coupled that with financial tools and resources that your company provides, gets them engaged in their own financial planning goals and making sure that they're doing the best for their employees, but it puts some onus on them as well to do some homework and take some time to think about that, right? But it's still further engaging them with your company. And lastly, financial planning, offering some sort of financial planning benefit can really, like I've said, create a roadmap to successful goal achievement, right? Help people set those goals, help people, and then help them figure out how way to do it. And sometimes that involves the help of a professional, if so needed. And it just creates that personal relationship and accountability partner. So these are all things that you can implement for your employees, and we're happy to help with that if you'd like. So with that being said, I hope that this presentation, like I mentioned, you got one thing out of this for yourself or for your employees. And if you have any questions about how you can implement or need assistance in what to do next, my contact information is here. But with that being said, I'll open it up for some more questions. I know we have some time left, so feel free to take it away, Caitlin.
And with that, we do have a question. How do employers find professionals to offer these programs?
Good question. So we offer these programs, so you can contact us. And also, some financial companies do offer them. Maybe your 401k provider or your retirement planning provider. But it's also something that we offer that we're happy to chat with you about.
If our plan is offered through a provider, who is the fiduciary?
If your 401k plan is offered through a provider, is that the question? Or what?
Just says if our plan.
Okay.
457 or 401k.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll tell you my background as a CFP and a financial planner. With my individual clients, I'm their fiduciary when it comes to advice and investments. So, and what that truly just means is that, I have to work in the best interests of my clients and the people that I work with. And it seems kind of silly, but it seems very basic, but that's truly what it means, working in your best interest. So fiduciaries, if you're asking for your 457 plan, that if it's through your provider, that would be a person, if there's someone's giving you advice on those plans, you can ask if they are a fiduciary. Not everyone is a fiduciary though. Just because you're giving investment advice doesn't mean that you're required to be a fiduciary.
What is your advice to employees who have no room for savings in their budget? Rent, student loans, food, and transportation take up 99% of their income rather than 50%.
Yeah, it's a tough place to be. I've worked with a lot of folks, just helping them out with getting a debt payment plan in place. And it can be really hard and painful sometimes. And like you said, if there's absolutely no wiggle room, it's really, really tough. But if we can create a game plan for debt management and making sure that people are focused on paying down those debts with the higher interest rate, and putting just a little bit of extra cash they can towards focused on that higher interest rate, and then slowly snowballing that debt down, right? Applying some of those same payments once that has been eliminated towards others. It takes time, right? It can't happen overnight, unfortunately. But having some sort of strategy like that, focusing on the higher interest rates, it gets you to that ideal, right? And no one's and some folks aren't going to be at that ideal today, but if they work towards it, obviously there's only so much you can control in your fixed expenses. But if they work towards it, I've seen people come out the other side when they have a clear game plan. Any other questions?
Is a consolidation loan a good idea if it's a lower interest rate than the debt being consolidated, but the payment per month would be about the same?
Okay, so for this is a pretty personal, a personal question, and it depends on what type of debt you're looking at as well. What I would encourage you to look at is the term of each of the debts that you're consolidating versus what the loan term is itself, and your overall interest that you're going to pay over time if you consolidated versus not. The other thing I like to point out to people, if you're thinking about student loan consolidation, is that when you consolidate to a private company, you no longer can apply or are eligible for those federal student loan benefits that people have been experiencing since COVID started. So those are all factors and considerations that are you should take into consideration if you're thinking about consolidating debt. Anything else, Kate?
Not yet. But every time I say that, another one pops up. So
Okay, well, while we're waiting, I'll move along to the credit slide. And Kate and I will stick around for any further questions, and I'll move to my contact information again after this. But thank you so much for having us, and we hope you enjoyed and learned a little something for yourself and for your employees.
as you were saying that, we got another one.
Oh, okay.
Is it a good idea to offer retirement loans for your 401k plans?
Okay, good question. So so specifically like 401k loans, if you offer those, we want to make sure employees are educated on what that means if they are to take them. There's different loan term requirements for those. And the big thing that I like to tell folks, depending again on the plan, is that if folks take a loan and they separate from service, in some situations, that means they either are required to immediately pay that back, or they are taxed at their taxable income plus the 10% penalty. So it's a great offering for folks who need that, but it's just making sure they understand what that is all encompassing. And of course, that plan depends on your plan and how you plan to offer that.
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for all of this wonderful information. I think people really are absorbing it. The questions have been wonderful. And I have promised that we will circulate your slides and your contact information to all who registered today. Especially for those who maybe registered and couldn't jump on. But like I said, we have recorded this, we will post it, and we will also share your slides. And if there are additional questions after we log off here, we will send folks your way. But thank you again, Katie and Caitlin, for really a very wonderful program. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. Have a wonderful week and stay warm.
Thank you. You as well.
Take care.